Everybody, what is going on? It is your man, Chris Flowers, the executive producer of the Biz Coach Show. And we are on with the one and only Eric T. Whitmoyer. He is the founder and CEO of My Biz Coaches. What is happening, sir?
Not too much, except we got some communication issues here.
Communication issues?
Yeah, I got this Knicks crap all over my channel here. I'm trying to figure out.
I want you to reach a broader audience. I want you to embrace
Nobody that follows the Knicks is going to want to listen to this show.
You would be surprised, sir. Hey, I'm the executive producer of the show, so therefore,
that says a lot right there.
That says a lot. I don't know, man. You've been slumming or something. I don't know what you're doing over. Hang out with the guys on the wrong side of the tracks. On top of that, I'm a Giants fan. Let's see. Anyway,
exactly. Just to be clear, I did not lose a bet. That's not why that "Let's Go Knicks" is all over my banner.
Hey, you know what? Like I said, when the Pittsburgh Steelers come back from 20 down against Kansas City in the third quarter and win the damn game, then you can talk to me. Until then,
right?
When's the last time you had?
I'm going to be looking for the opportunity to rub that in.
Oh, well, I'm a Giants fan, so that won't be too hard. That will not be difficult, sir.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But
all right, anyway. You ready to do this today?
I don't know, man. Business is hard, man. I don't know if we can do this, man, because business is hard. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I heard it's effing hard.
I heard it's really effing hard. I heard you got to have some stones. That's what I heard.
Yeah. Big enough to come in a wheelbarrow.
The question is, do you have it?
Yeah.
You got the backbone.
What's ironic is since the majority of my individual clients are actually women, I don't know that resonates as well for
them. I had one female. I can't remember. I can try to remember who it was. It was obviously somebody that's very outspoken. She literally said, you got to put your tits out there and just fucking go. Like, you just like, okay, all right. I was leaving that comment alone. I'm like, all right, we're rolling with that one.
I can't even compete with that.
It wasn't in like a sexual, like you got to show off, but it was just like basically stick your chest out there and just, go through it.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm saying. I can't compete with that.
Yeah. So, but no, I was like, all right, hey, she went there. All right, cool. All right. I ain't mad. It happens. All right. So obviously, we both know business is hard. Okay. But we wanted to, talk about, things that we can do. Like I said, you're not in this alone, different, things you got to understand, certain things when it comes to the different aspects of the businesses and how you have to approach things. Give people a game plan, give people, some kind of like, a guiding light, if you will, because like I said, obviously, being the business coach that you are, you work with a lot of different companies and a lot of different situations. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are okay, we're plateauing out, take it to the next level kind of thing. So I wanted to, maybe talk to you a little bit about, the different stages in business, things like that, and maybe some different things to look out for, maybe some different tips, that you can maybe speak on, things like that. One of the things I wanted to talk about, obviously, when especially if you're a solopreneur or you're just starting up a company, things like that, you're expected, to be an expert in everything when you're most certainly not. And I know, we cover that in our coaching sessions about this 6 succession areas and things like that. So, and you're kind of experts on like, couple, 3 of them, but how do you go about coaching that and, obviously playing to your strengths?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when we outline in our assessments, the 6 core competencies for people, we help them self-identify, which ones they're competent in those competencies. And often what we recognize and identify through that process is one, we quickly identify we are not experts in everything, right? However, it feels like, to your point, expected to be experts in everything. Even myself, I will openly say, I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know everything about everything, right? And it's just openly not. And so I will go as deep as I'm capable of in a particular area, which makes it seem like I know a lot, but I just know a lot about a lot of different things. I know
Mhm.
a reasonable amount about about a number of different things. But the average owner doesn't have that, to your point, the breadth of experience in different businesses. And that's where, myself personally as a coach, and I think some of the better coaches that are out there, business coaches specifically, that's kind of where our forte often comes from, is that we've got that life experience in doing a lot of different types of roles in different organizations, multiple organizations, and some
Mm.
being our own organizations. Because when you learn that way, it's often through trial and error and hard, and making mistakes. I mean, it's like the going joke about experience is, well, to get experience, you often have to do something wrong to learn from it to get the experience, right? So
Right.
the truth of the matter is, if you're pretty well experienced, it's because you made a lot of flipping mistakes over time
Right.
and learn from them. And those become entrenched lessons that you then can share later on when the same topics come up. Because the one thing that we do know about business in general is there's not a million things you need to learn about business. It's actually some really core competence, those 6 core competencies that we talk about. Um, but to your point, the challenge is we typically only bring 1 to maybe 3 to the table, right? Like, as an inherent skill set,
Mhm.
what we understand, what we know, what we're trained on, what we experienced in our careers. Often, you're capped out at 3, and to know it and with any real carnal knowledge at that point is beyond those 3 is unrealistic, unless you've had a lot of different types of experiences. But somebody who comes from operations is going to get the operations side of it. Somebody who comes from the finance side will understand the finance side of it. Maybe if you finance and operations, you got a combination of the two. If you're sales, you likely know something about marketing. If you're in marketing, you might know a little bit about sales, but those are not like direct correlations to one another. And so the challenge is that any business owner may have, that 3 or 4 or 5 different areas that they're not competent in, and that's going to directly impact their ability to be successful. So what we hopefully help them identify is, okay, of these 6 core competencies, where are you lacking? Right.
Mhm.
And it's not a conversation about where you're lacking. It's just where are you comfortable? Right. Oh, I'm comfortable. This, and this. Great. Now we can identify that. What are the areas that you don't like to do or aren't good
Mhm.
at? Okay, I'm this, and this. Awesome. Right. So let's build a plan so that you understand those components of the business. You can speak to them with some confidence and competency. But more specifically, let's say develop a plan. I'm sorry. Let's develop a plan that will then allow you to delegate those responsibilities, and allow you to get an opportunity, to get that off of your plate and give it to somebody who can help you through that. And generally, a good place to start is with a coach, because a coach will should have enough insight in those particular areas, those other areas that you may not be as strong in, to help you identify, yeah, okay, let's find that person that's good at that particular area.
Mhm.
So, for instance, right, it's some people are really good at understanding finance. As a matter of fact, literally a coaching session I had right before our recording today was, understanding the math of business. And the math of business isn't hard if you understand the math, but it's like trying to do. It's not even like doing basic arithmetic and things like that. Nor is it like doing, algebra, which is an extension of basic arithmetic, right? It's
Mhm.
more like doing geometry, which is nothing like algebra or basic
Right.
arithmetic, right? It's got its own math, and if you have to understand the basics of it, but it's got its own math, and it doesn't necessarily always correlate back. But when you understand it and you understand how the dynamics of the finance work, then it's real easy. But until you do and can kind of extrapolate from that, what are the KPIs that need to manage in your business? That part of the business makes zero sense to you. And if you need to make good decisions, you often need good data to do that. In many cases, it's financial data, or at least conversion data, something along from a marketing perspective. You have to understand those numbers and that math and how they correlate to one another, and how I can take your conversion rates and turn that into target revenue number.
Mhm.
Right. But if you don't understand all those numbers come together, you're going to struggle immensely. Same thing when it comes to sales or operations or marketing or whatever.
Well, before we get too deep into the weeds and dive in this, we can go down this rabbit hole all day. I think the message that we're really trying to put out is that, there's that old thing is like, oh, you have to know what your weaknesses are and build those up. That's true to a certain extent down the road, But when you're first starting out in business, play to your strengths. Okay. Find out what you're good at. Use that. Okay. And then because down the road, like, let's say for instance, like, you're not an IT guy. Okay, great. You know what? Plenty of people are. You know what? Go hire somebody. I'll always go back to that Andy Stanley, next generation leader. There are people out there that love to do what you hate, pay them to do it. So even if you can recognize the fact is, and hey, that goes the other way around. Not everybody's a great salesperson. Okay, great. Recognize it, own it. That's fantastic. Bring in somebody that can sell the business for you. That is, can speak to it with the passion about it that you can, because it's your baby. Not everybody, when you hire a salesperson, are not always going to be able to, speak about something as passionately as you are, because they didn't create it. So you got to make sure you got to find, the right fit, but just recognizing, hey, I'm not strong at sales. I got a salesperson. I'm not strong at IT. I got to hire somebody. Down the road at first, you do have to wear all the hats. But let's get it. Let's gauge a plan to where it's like, hey, you know what? First, second, we get get the cash flow coming and things like that. Let's delegate. Let's offload that real fast and move it down the road.
The important part is to identify, and the other part of that is to identify which of those need to be offloaded first, right?
Yep.
In order of in a sequence of, this is the one that's going to trip us up the most if we don't solve this, right? If you don't know finance and you don't have somebody to manage your finances, that'd be one of the first things you want to make sure you introduce it to. Even a bookkeeper, something as simple as that, will help you at least ensure that the data is being captured, and then you can use that to generate the type of information you want to get from it or whatever. So, but great point. It's like, you don't need to know it all, but you do need to eventually get some basic understanding of all of it so you can see the whole picture.
Right. I know the one thing, we talked about in our coaching and things like that. It's like, hey, you know what? You definitely got to get the sales and, the sales and the marketing piece have got to be in the forefront, because that's what's going to drive the revenue in, to where, like, okay, now that we're actually, cash flowing here a little bit, now we can start looking at, automating some things. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to outsource it, but you can automate. Like, hey, you know what? Let's use our CRM. Let's see what we can do to, get those emails out, with an automation, as opposed to, you sitting there hand typing everything and doing all that. Kind of, we talked about a little bit, flowing into it. Cash flow is the silent killer.
Yep.
So since we said we were speaking on cash flow a little bit,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, knowing how to, knowing the difference between profitability and cash flow are two different things, and understanding how the cycle works. So why don't you go ahead and speak about that?
Yeah. So it's a great point, and that's probably it's an awesome title. Cash flow is the silent killer, or can be the silent killer anyway. Most businesses don't fail because of a bad product or service. They often fail because they ran out of money. As a matter of fact, statistically speaking, of all the businesses that go out of business, 82% label their number one reason for going out of business a lack of funds. That could be not enough sales. It also could be that they didn't manage the money correctly.
Correct.
Right? Not knowing how to allocate that. It goes back to the first thing we were talking about, particularly as it relates to finance, right?
Exactly. Yep.
But managing your startup capital, here's another couple of key statistics. The average business that's created in the United States, which represents about 33%. So about a third of all businesses created in the United States start with $5,000 or less in startup capital. Meaning, for most people, they probably put it on a credit card.
Probably.
Yep. And then 40% of all businesses are started with less than $50,000. Sorry. So 40% of all businesses started with less than $50,000. There's 34.5 million businesses. 40% of them, almost half, are all started with less than $50,000, which
Wow.
for most people, access to $50,000 is not unreasonable. I mean, that's a HELOC. Could have been a series of credit cards. I mean, it would not be hard to come up with 50 grand. Sometimes it might feel like it's hard to come up with 50 grand, but generally speaking, it's not impossible to come up with 50 grand. Friends and family could make up 50 grand, right? So it's not unreasonable to come up with 50 grand. Yet almost half of all businesses start with less than $50,000. And again, I bring up the fact 82% say they ran out of money. They're not starting with enough money to begin with, right? So that's problem number one, right? Problem number two is not enough sales coming in. So you just touched on something earlier. You said in the beginning, in when we first get a business off the ground, we're focused on, of the 6 core competencies, our number one and number two, and it depends on the order, right? And which ones comes faster, it's sales and marketing, right? I mean, that's a core competency. Those combined are a core competency. Now, chicken or the egg, right? I market to sell, right? I market to sell, right? And it's like, so it's got to be marketing, and I got to immediately be selling. Now, there's the third component of that in the first phase, which is really it's marketing and selling, and then it's fulfillment. Need to make sure I get the client to the customer.
Conversions, yep.
Yeah, but without the sale and generating the revenue, right, that the business won't last, right? So and a lot of times people are kind of fumbling their way through their sales process. They don't know who they're marketing to. They're marketing to the wrong people. They're not clearly identifying who their ideal target audience is. When they get in front of the client, they're selling to people that don't have the money. That means you're selling to the wrong client base, which means you're probably marketing to the wrong client base. Right. So all of these things are direct correlations to cash flow challenges, because without those sales and without enough startup capital, there's no way you last 3 to 5 years in business, right? You're just going to eventually run out or burn out, one of the two.
Right.
So, but here's the thing, whatever money you start with and whatever sales you're able to generate, if you don't manage your money well, that's going to be your next tripping area. That's the next area that's going to trip you up. That's going to cause you to have to shut down the business. The silent killer is not managing cash flow effectively. I can't tell you how many times, and I will tell you that in the early days, this is my opportunity, which was, I would say, oh, I need more leads. All right, I'm from my own perspective, I'm not talking about the coaching business. I'm actually talking about a leads business that I bought, I don't know, 13 years ago. So 13 years ago, I bought online leads, right? I would resell the leads. So I had a business, I needed leads. And so I didn't want to go out and do a bunch of cold calling. It's not my skill set, not my jam, not what I want to be doing. So I'm like, well, what could I do instead? So I found an online leads business where I would actually buy the leads for the type of client that I wanted at a wholesale price, and I could turn around and resell them at a retail price.
Okay.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, I bought the leads for loans. That's a business, and I would buy those loan leads for $40. I could turn around and sell them to people who were doing loans for $100 a qualified lead.
Right.
Buy it for 40, sell it for $6, or sell it for 100 to make a $60 profit. And oh, by the way, if I was in the same business, I could buy it at wholesale, which means I can buy 2.5 as many leads as you can. So I'm thinking this is a no-brainer. So I got into it. We started with opportunity seekers. That was our first client base that we focused on. The reason I share all this is because when I bought the business, I thought, okay, I'm going to buy that business. That's going to fund, right? I'll generate the leads and I'll fund the business. Well, then the next thing I realized is now I need a CRM, because I got all these leads coming in. I got to put them into the CRM. So I don't just buy any CRM. I buy the one with the biggest bells and whistles and all that fun stuff. Right. And then on the next thing, now you still got to call those leads. Well, I don't want to call those leads, so let me get a calling system. So then I invest in a calling system, and the calling system, I think it was like $300 a month back then.
Now, granted, you haven't generated $1 yet, but you got all these expenditures going out.
There you go. You're getting it, right? So the point is at the end of the day, I bought all these, invested in all of these different solutions, and hadn't generated $1 in revenue yet. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the story turned out fine, because I ended up selling it for like 6 times what I bought the business for. But in the short term, I literally bumped up against the wall where I'm like, well, I got to put more money back into this business. I took an existing business that already had a revenue stream, and within 2 months, I already had to put more money into the business because I had spent the cash flow that was coming in on other things because I wanted to scale this business, but I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing yet. So anyway, the point is when you don't watch your expenses and you allow them to run away from you and you're chasing the shiny object and you're like, well, I could use this. Well, let me just buy it, right? I need this. Let me buy it. Well, you spend the money before you actually are getting the revenue, the return on it. You're putting yourself in a bad spot really quickly. And a lot of small business owners do that because they don't know what they're buying. I go out and buy SEO. Well, you can get the same quality of SEO from somebody who's selling it for $750 a month as you can for selling it for somebody who's selling it $3,000 a month. People will argue with me and say, no, my SEO is better. I will tell you that very seldom are you going to find anything significantly different between $750 and $3,000. They're going to tell you it's different. They're going to tell you why they think it's different. But at the end of the day, if you understand that SEO works, SEO is SEO. It's not dramatically different. Now, if they're not good at it, that's another conversation. But I can tell you, I can find quality people for $750 a month versus $3,000. If you don't know that and you don't understand that, you're paying $3,000. You know how you understand whether or not it's working? You look at your website in 3 months or 4 months, and if your traffic hasn't gone up by 30, 40, 50%, it's not working. Right? So cut your losses and realize that you made a bad investment and you need to figure out a better solution. Most people won't cut their losses.
Right.
So they keep adding up their debt. They're not their debt, but they're negative. They're building up against their cash flow.
That's the one thing I think having somebody like you know, somebody outside looking in, because me as a business owner, I'm very passionate about this. Like, oh yeah, if I just, you know, and of course, you know, we can justify spending money on anything, right? We can say, oh yeah, you know, this shiny, you know, new toy. I was like, Google and Meta ads. I can put some money into that. You know, you know, those kind of things. You can spend a shitload of money on Google and Meta ads and get zero ROI out of it. You know what I mean? And just keep, and you think, I'll just put some more money into it, you know, things like that. No, they'll gladly take it. Most definitely. But if you can speak to somebody like yourself, you know, I was just speaking to Admira a little while ago, our fractional CFO friend, and, you know, her and I were having a conversation about sometimes you don't even have to, you know, reduce your spending. Sometimes you just have to reallocate. You have to take, you have to be able to, and that's what I like about you is that you're very analytical, you know, and you see the numbers and you see the formulas, and it's like, okay, look at your ROI here and look at your ROI here. If we reallocate this money maybe over here, where, you know, you might be killing it in this one area, but not really realizing, like, you know, the money you're spending over here that you're getting zero ROI. If we don't have to change the budget whatsoever. We really allocate those funds over here. We could, you know, expand to X. You see those things very well. So
yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's a great point. A good example of that on your average small business owner. How much money you spending on networking a year? Add up your BNI, add up your, you know, whatever other networking groups you're working with. Add up how much you spend on the membership. Then add up how much you spend on your dues, and then add up how much you spend on driving there, and the hours that you spend, and the lunches you buy, and take all that money. And if you can't show that you're getting a 3x return on your investment on that, meaning you're bringing in, let's say your all-in cost for the year between those couple of marketing networking groups and all the other associated, let's say it's all $5,000. If you can't generate $15,000 in revenue from the $5,000 spent, it's a bad investment.
Yep.
Right. I mean, 2 to 1. Some people would argue, you know, 2.5 to 1. That's actually not bad, maybe, but and it depends if you're high ticket or low ticket. There's a lot of conversations go into that, but generally speaking, if you're not getting a 3x ROAS, then you're probably not in a good space for that. So, but most people don't do the due diligence, and so what ends up happening is they're throwing good money after bad. They're going more and more negative. They're cutting into what profits they would have had because many of those sales would have happened anyway without that networking ad spend, right? And so, anyway, that's a big reason why these things happen and play out the way they do. And then you have that attachment you referenced earlier, right? I can justify why I should spend this money.
Oh, we always can.
Yeah,
we always can.
That's the problem, because then you don't want to be wrong. So it's like from stock picking. If you're familiar with that analogy, you're like, you don't want to be wrong on the stock pick, so you just keep doubling down on dollar cost averaging. No, you're just doubling down on a loser is what you're doing. and eventually it'll play out, and you'll see the loss.
Exactly. No, like I said, you know, you got some things are going to be mandatory spends. Like, hey, you know what? If I make, you know, this widget, I need the raw materials to make that widget. I need the machinery to make said widget, things like that. We got to have those. But like you said, if something, you know, yeah, can I go, you know, some people, you know, have like, hey, you know, we're making more money now. Let's get this shiny new piece of equipment. If the old piece of equipment is working and we're putting it out there, keep using that. Don't spend that, you know, how about if we build some cash reserves, or how about if we, you know, maybe if we can, you know, just maybe hire a new employee to produce that much, if we can, you know, justify the spend, things like that. But, you know, yeah, the shiny objects are out there, and you're like, ooh.
Agreed.
You know,
the last thing I'll say on that real quick was you'd mentioned it, and I think it's a great point to kind of circle back on, is you'll have a tendency to get locked in on, you know, like the shiny object that you referenced, right? And you're like, oh, I need this, or I need this, or I need this. Well, similarly, if the equipment works and you're like, you know, there's this new piece of equipment and it will 10x your productivity.
That's a whole different subject.
And you have the ability to increase your lead flow by 10x.
Yeah.
Then to your point, that absolutely is a different conversation, right?
Correct.
But you have to have the data to be able to make that extrapolation and determine, you know, even if I can't get a 10x, if I can get a 3x, right? If it costs me some more money, but I can increase my productivity by 3x, well, then that makes sense to do that. But you have to be able to know that with certainty, not that I'm pulling a guess out of your ass that you're going to be able to make it, you know, get a 3x. And that's 100%. Where people make their mistakes with that cash flow issue, is they spend the money before they completely do their due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Nope, absolutely. You will eventually need to get there. You will, like I said, I like what Dave Ramsey said, an entrepreneur, or was it EntreLeadership? He was saying, like, hey, if you can make a profit with a $2 hammer, why buy a $20 hammer? He goes, eventually you will need the $20 hammer because production is going to go up so much. But at the same time, if you're still making a profit with a $2 hammer, keep the $2 hammer. Yeah.
Yep.
One thing, you know, especially us veterans, you know, we're very passionate about things. Like, everybody, remember all of our buddies wanted to start a t-shirt company. Like, whenever they got put all these patriotic slogans and all kinds of shit on there and things like that. And, you know, I think what a lot of them really realize really fast, that the market doesn't really care about your passion.
You know, I think that's a really hard one for entrepreneurs often, is the truth of the matter is, to your point, the market doesn't care about your passion, right?
Yeah.
Until you prove that you bring value, right? That's the concept, right? Until you prove that you bring value, you may love your idea, but if the market doesn't see the validation of it, then nobody's going to get behind it. Nobody gets behind it, you're not growing the business. This is where, and I think that, you know, we recently spoke to some clients at different times where we talked about business plans. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I openly say about business plans, and you know, a lot of people have mixed feelings about business plans. I think that anybody who truly understands what a business plan can do for you sees the value in it. The hard part is identifying the fact that a business plan is just a plan, and the plans change, right? In the military, we learned the hard way that, you know, shit
fragos.
Yeah, and it changes regularly, and it changes by the minute.
Fragos. Yep.
And at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is that the purpose of the plan is less about the plan and more about your ability to critically think about your business, to make insightful decisions based on the data that you have. You know, can you make and can extrapolate from that data and can make a decision based on that, based on what you see, or an assessment, right? And so if you look at this and you say, okay, well, the average person out there is really passionate about, you mentioned t-shirts and quotes or whatever, and not a quote. What was the term you used?
Slogans. Yeah.
Slogan. There you go. Slogan. Yep. So, you know, you got a particular slogan. I got your 6 on the back of a t-shirt, right? That would resonate well with the military, right? So, we know that there's a niche for that, right? And there's a certain group. But if you sold that to a bunch of people that don't get that, you'd have to explain it to them.
Right.
If you have to explain it to them,
They're not buying it.
they're not buying it, right? They have to completely appreciate and understand it. They have to see that and get it immediately. And if
Mhm.
they don't see it and get it immediately, you're preaching to the wrong audience, right?
Right.
And that often we as entrepreneurs can have a tendency to do that. We get all excited about this idea. We had a struggle with this. We had a frustration with this, whatever it might be, and we came up with this idea. Okay, great example. I have told my story multiple times about my networking experience and how much I generated all these business cards and it created all this. And I got a little bit of sales from it. But the reality was what I ended up with was over 300 business cards that I never did anything with. Right. I had 20 some odd cards or something like that I had connections with. And I sold a couple of those clients. I still had 300 business cards. I never even did anything. I never even put it into a CRM. And then fast forward, I don't know, 4 months later, my brother's like, hey, what are you going to do with these business cards? I'm like, I don't know. Ideally, I want to put them in CRM and start a campaign with them. But they're so old now, 4 or 5 months later, I'm not sure that it's even worth it. He goes, well, I'm not doing anything. Let me go ahead and do that for you. I'm like, okay. So he puts them into the CRM. We put together a campaign and we mail it out to a bunch of people. Oh, and lo and behold, we generate $10,000 in revenue from it.
Wow.
Right.
Nice.
So here's the lesson was, I didn't capture the data in the moment that I should have because I got a business card and then I did what most people do with the business card is I put them on a stack on my desk and here they are and I got to go through them and put them into the CRM. And so we came up with this idea for this digital business card. I think it's phenomenal. I think anybody who does networking would understand because we connected it to the CRM so that when you give me your information, you immediately go into my CRM and it begins a drip campaign to engage with you. I will tell you that I have shown this to a few hundred people. The percentage of people that really get the value of it
it's
and
freaking genius.
Well, here's the problem. A lot of people see it and they're like, oh, that's phenomenal, but none of them will do the work that it takes to freaking set up because it's just easier just to hand them a regular business card because that's what we're trained to do. You have to have the discipline to hand out the business card. So that product has never really taken off. As a matter of fact, we give it away for free to our clients because we're like, hey, this is a great way to ensure that you get all that contact information.
I've had people younger than me at a network who's like, oh, I'm old school. I use business cards. I said, bro, I'm older than you. I'm old enough to be your dad. Okay. And I'm using digital cards. Don't give me that shit. I'm literally old enough to be your father. Don't tell me about your old school. Okay.
Exactly. But you get the point. I mean, I was super passionate about it, but nobody else, either they couldn't see the vision, which I don't think that was the case, although that could have been it. But what was definitely clear is they didn't see the value. Mm-hmm. They didn't see how much time it would save them. Maybe because they didn't do the same exercise that I did and saw the $10,000 windfall after my brother took the time to load all those business cards into the CRM and then build a sequence, a follow-up sequence, which I'm going to tell you, it probably took him 2 weeks to build it all out and set it all up. But so the point is that you may love your idea, but if the market can't validate the value of it, you're not going to see any enthusiasm behind it. It's not going to take off. It's not going to go anywhere. It certainly won't go viral. And you're going to have to adjust accordingly. Right. And so here's the other part of that I think is really important. You have to hear what your clients are telling you their problems are, not what you perceive the problems to be. And I love this phrasing. I think it speaks to what I'm kind of drawing the point on. In his biography, Steve Jobs.
Okay.
He's quoted as saying, people don't know what he would say that the people, when they were talking about what we're going to put in the phone next, the iPhone, when they were developing the iPhone, he would say, people don't know what they want until I tell them what they want. Because it was an evolving technology that was constantly evolving and nobody really knew what all you could do with a phone. Right. But he had a vision. He knew technologically what he could do with an iPhone. Right. He'd already perfected the iPod. Right. And then they came out with the iPad. And then as they evolved and developed into this iPhone, what they were identifying is, I can do even more. When the chipset technology started getting smaller and smaller, you could put more and more information on that chip. It completely changed the game on cell phones. And I know you remember when the most significant thing you could do on your phone was play Snake.
Right.
Right. That was the thing. I was like,
Ooh.
what? This is amazing. And it went from being able to play Snake to today we can trade our stocks and, order our food and buy a movie and watch a movie and whatever else we can do on a phone. Right. The point is, nobody could see that except Steve Jobs. I say he's not the only one, but he definitely got the idea that I see it, you don't see it, I'll make it available to you. But even then, he could see what people could use it for, and they could draw that back. Most of us are not that ingenious. Most of us are not that, right? They don't have that vision to look that far down the road. What we need to do is we need to get from our clients what are the problems you're struggling with, and what are the solutions that I could create for you or provide to you that you would be willing to pay me to help you solve. Right? Most people won't take the time to do that due diligence, and so what you run into is you can be super passionate that you're solving problems, but the reality is it's not a problem that the customer is willing to pay you to solve.
Going back to transitioning from physical business cards to digital cards and things like that, and rolling with the times and things, that's another thing I think that business owners make it harder on themselves because they won't evolve. They won't relinquish the control and the iron grip on this is how we do things. I mean, there's certain things that are, tested, tried, true, things like that, that you want to stick with to a certain extent. But at the same time, it's like, again, we'll always go back to Blockbuster, right? Always go back to that because they refused. Great
example.
To evolve. They refused. Streaming started coming out. And they're like, oh, that's never going to take off. Things like that. Your mobile phones, they make phone calls. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
Meanwhile, Nokia and all those guys started going out the door.
So the example you just made about Blockbuster, that's an MBA level course on arrogance.
Right.
My shit doesn't stink. I know what I have. I have a phenomenal product, solution, whatever. And literally did not invest the time in understanding of what the technology was going to evolve into. And how long did it take? It was like overnight.
Almost overnight.
I could tell you that the first company I worked with in the wireless industry was a paging company. We were at core a paging carrier. And then we got into selling cell phones in our retail stores. So when they realized how much money you could make reselling the airtime on paging, that's when we got into retail stores. So I came in about the time that was evolving from the paging into the cell phones because analog cell phones were becoming cost effective. And it was right on the cusp of moving into digital technology. And as soon as digital technology came around, the cost per call came down from, instead of being $3.95 a minute, all of a sudden you were buying 60 minutes for $19.99, right? It was a complete game changer, right? And now all of a sudden, these are affordable to just about anybody. And when that happened, the company I was working for was like, "Whoa, wait, don't sell the cell phone if we can make money on the paging." And I'm like, nobody wants the pagers. Everybody wants the cell phone. So I got ingenious, and what I did is I actually sold the phone and gave away the pager. And the positioning was get the phone for you, give the pager to your kid so you can stay in contact with him.
Okay.
And that did well for about 18 months. And then paging disappeared off the face of the earth.
Right.
But the point was that it was like the owners, the executives were pushing from the top down to us in the field. And they're like, yeah, you gotta keep selling the pagers. And I'm like, nobody wants them. Unload this albatross, right? Let's get out from underneath this before we get buried. That company went bankrupt a year later.
I wonder why. So you got to be able to make the adjustments. You got, there's going to, then there's also, as soon as you start something, you're innovative, you're doing something new, you're doing something different. Guess what? Somebody's going to copy it. Somebody's going to come out. I could, obviously even in, the business I do now, like I said, running a podcast or doing video marketing, things like that. There's tons of other podcasts and there's tons of video marketing, but what makes them different is me. And, how I do it and the way I do it. And, and I try to, meet my customers' pain points and things like that. So I'm not afraid to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is a pretty loaded market, but here's my market dominating position that I learned from some other guy. And, Here's my market dominating position. I'm gonna go dominate the market and start running with it. So
Right.
you got to be able to make those adjustments. Speaking of not doing things like we said, we know business is hard. You don't want to do this alone because isolation is a real thing, and
Yeah.
it's dangerous, man. Like I said,
You know,
you can be a hermit.
yeah. Yeah. You know, what's interesting is I think what's accelerated that, just like it impacted corporations, where they started getting work from home and all that kind of stuff particularly during COVID, right?
Right.
There was an immediate transition to that. And I think what's interesting, being a business owner in and of itself, there's a lot of loneliness in that space as it is, right? Just feeling like you're the one that has to make all the decisions.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right?
That's it. Exactly. And ironically, if you ask a lot of people why they went out and started their own business, because they wanted to be in charge of their own life or their own circumstances or their own income or whatever it was, they wanted that responsibility. Then they got it. And it's like that age-old story. Be careful what you ask
What you wish for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And with that responsibility, there is a tendency, particularly for entrepreneurs, especially people that get in entrepreneurship, generally speaking, are ambitious individuals. People are used to winning, right? And so they get out there and they have setbacks, and extremely few. We call the unicorns, the companies that go off and become billion-dollar companies. We call those unicorns. But the truth of the matter is, any business that's launched that doesn't have at least any entrepreneur that launches a business that doesn't have some sequence of losses or failures before the success, that's a unicorn. Because you ask most successful business owners out there today, how many times did they have, whether you consider it a failure or a setback, they at least had setbacks before they had the breakthrough, right? And so the truth of the matter is you're so used to you're being out there on your own, making your own decisions, trying to figure this out for yourself. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's, you don't want to, sometimes you don't want to give up a competitive advantage to somebody else. So you keep it all to yourself, right? Sometimes you don't want people to know your business. Sometimes you're afraid to share that you're not successful. Whatever the rationale is, you get this caught up in this idea that I don't want to, I can do this on my own. I can figure it out. Well, there's something to be said about putting in the discipline to figure something out. There's also the concept of beating your head against the wall, right? And continue to do things that don't work. Right. Sometimes all you need is just a little switch of the way you think about something, and it completely triggers a whole new opportunity that you didn't see before. Because it's a different set of eyes. It's a different perspective. It's somebody who's coming at it from an objective perspective. That's what I love to say about business coaches. If you understand the value of a business coach, besides telling you what to do or how to do something or whether or not they have insight into these different categories, at the end of the day, the best thing that a coach brings to the table is an objective perspective. I can look at something differently than you do because I'm not emotionally attached to the business. It is not my blood, sweat, and tears in the business. For anybody who's been a step parent can appreciate what I'm about to say. I think that one of the things that made me a really, really good parent, and I'm quantifying that based on what my kids told me. And they're not good at lying. So they honestly believe I was a good father. As a stepfather, one of the advantages I had is I was just a tad bit more objective than my wife was, their biological mother.
Yeah.
Right. I loved them immensely. Right. I helped raise them. But there was just a little bit of that where I was able to step back and just be slightly more objective than my wife would be at times.
Makes sense.
And because of that, my coaching, my parenting was a little bit more practical, was a little bit more relatable. Plus, I had 5 stepfathers. I knew what a bad stepfather looked like.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
By the time I became a stepfather in my early 30s, I knew what was not good about certain stepfathers that I'd had. Right.
From experience.
And I did have a good model in my father of the things that he did for me. Right. And the one thing he did is he encouraged me to make my own decisions and challenged me and said, if you make a bad decision, just know there's consequences. And if you make a bad decision, know that you have to deal with those consequences.
Right.
That was one of the things I instilled in my children. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to give you this is the good, this is the bad. Just know that whatever decision you make, if it doesn't work out the way you want, one, you can adjust and change it. And two, if it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, and you're stuck in it, that's your own damn fault. Right? Because you have the ability to do what you need to do to change it. And because of that, I honestly don't think that my kids have made any bad decisions. Maybe some better than others for sure, but certainly not out and out route bad decisions. But I say all of that to say that as it relates to being a business owner, one of the things you need to remember is that when you're emotionally tied to the business, you're not always going to make the best decisions. And so just having a, what's the term I want to use? Sounding board.
Yep.
To bounce ideas off of sometimes. I mean, how many times are sessions sounding boards for you?
Oh, constantly.
Right? Yeah. I mean, just, like, hey, I got this idea, boss. What do you think about this? Hey, Eric, what do you think about this? And even sometimes I'll push back and say, that might be maybe this, maybe try that. Right. And it's more of a collaborative solution.
Right. I was literally just going to bring that up because, like I said, when I first started the show, I was all about just, getting sponsorships and getting commercials. And you're like, hey, you could spin this off into video content. People need video content, which I hadn't thought about, if it was more like phase 2, phase 3, you're like, hey, we could do this now and it can generate income now, and gain, I was like, all right, yeah, you know what, you're right. And then just kind of just evolved, from there. But like I said, I wasn't seeing that right away. I was all about, producing a show and getting it out there. And, obviously, getting the viewership. That way more sponsors come on board, things like that. So.
Yep. Yeah. Great point.
You saw that way before I did.
Yeah. Oh, and again, I wasn't emotionally attached to your show or even the people you were bringing on the show. What I saw was an obvious opportunity, which was most people should be creating video and they're not. The whole reason I created the Biz Coach Show 2.5 years ago was because David, your predecessor, said to me, hey, boss, what would be really cool is if we got you on camera and had you answer a bunch of questions about business because you got so much information. Laying it all out in a book is not the easiest thing to do. But what if we captured it all on video and then just put it out there for people to learn from? I'm like, oh, what a great idea. And that's easy for me to do. I can do that. Get on a camera and talk about it. That's what you were doing. And the difference was I saw that. I'm like, there's a lot of people that should be doing that. They're not. And maybe you could help them see that by your example on your channel.
Nope. It's definitely good to have that outside perspective, from the outside looking in 100%, know. And I think, one of the last things that we'll probably need to cover in this session, how it is a full-time mental game.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to hit the highs, you're going to hit the lows. When you got to, and when you do, like I said, we talked about it earlier. I mean, what did Hormuzzi say? Like, failed 9 different companies he started and failed in the beginning and things like that. So you don't think that was mentally screwing with him? Like, what I'm saying? Yeah. So he just kept going and moving forward, innovated this, changed this, things like that. So especially as guys, we got egos, we got families to provide for. It's like, it's rough. And I think, or like I said, or maybe, like you said, maybe it's a unicorn. Maybe you take off like a rocket and oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. You're on easy street. But then, like I say, if you're not watching the store, you get too concentrated on one particular client and that client leaves. Oh shit. There went the revenue. So now what? And if you never faced that adversity before, how do you adjust? How do you make, how do you do that? Like, these are all, or I said, or if you fight, you're digging, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. It's like, okay, now we got to, things are going pretty well. Let's start loosening the grip a little bit. Let's start, like I said, let's start bringing on some people. Let's start outsourcing some stuff. No, it's my way or the highway. No, they won't do it as good as I do. And then you're stagnating yourself.
Yep. All great examples of exactly the kind of crap that we deal with as business owners.
Yep.
It is every bit of an emotional roller coaster, and it is relentless. It doesn't let up. It never gets easy. It gets easier, but it never gets easy.
Correct.
Right. That's about as true as you can possibly get. The setbacks will be easier to adjust to because you'll understand, you'll have been through some of those setbacks, you'll have muscled through some of those challenges in the past. And so when it shows itself again in a different way, you'll be able to muscle through it. You'll be able, and you'll have the confidence to get through it because you've seen it before. I mean, that's all experience is, right? All experience is literally making the mistake. And the more mistakes you make, the more you learn, right? As we discussed. So the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, what makes you good at whatever you do is having made mistakes along the way. But to your point, those mistakes that you make also can leave residue
right,
on your
right.
on your psyche. Is like, well, I messed that up, right? I made a mistake, and if you carry that, that you're going to have so much baggage that you're going to be lugging around. You'll never be able to find success because you'll be constantly holding on to the bad stuff.
Or you just quit, or they'll just quit.
Or you'll just quit. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You'll shut down early and just be like, you know what, I can't do it. This is hard. And it is hard. The truth of the matter is, and it can be super hard, but it's a winnable game. It's a winnable game that has real opportunity to, I mean, I mean, honestly, this is what motivates us, that we see the Rocky story, success story, right? Whatever you want to analogy you want to tie to that, right? That concept. But you look at the Microsofts and the Warren Buffetts and I just kept plugging away, kept doing what I was doing. I knew I was doing the right thing, blah, 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 blah. IBM. Yeah, I think of any major company, and you hear the stories that they went through. Sam Walton with Walmart, right? All the different things that they did and kept plugging away and pushing and pushing. And even when they were in early success mode, they still weren't happy. They were still pushing and still challenging and trying to find something else. And they had the discipline to keep pushing when things are good. That takes a lot of discipline.
Right. Instead of coasting and going on easy street.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, I made it. I made it.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if it were me, and I probably, this is the first time I've ever said this out loud. If it were me and I felt like I'd hit the wall and I really didn't feel like I had what I needed to keep whatever business I was focused on going, I would sell and walk away and cash out whatever I could cash out and pull my chips off the table so that the next venture I went into, I'd have some fresh perspective. Rather than, if I felt like I hit the wall, rather than continue to muscle through, I think it would be better to unload, cash in the chips, and start over from scratch the following day. It's like literally, if you're playing at your Atlantic City or Vegas or something like that, and you're playing whatever you play, whatever your choice of game is, and you're up, what do people say all the time? Cash in when you're up, right? If you hold on too long, circumstances can flip. And I think that one of the things you have to consider, and this is one of the things, I didn't directly learn this lesson, but I did, I guess, for lack of a term, vicariously through my previous CEO, when we sold our wireless entity to another wireless dealer, we sold, and 2 years later, I couldn't tell you what we sold for, but I can tell you the valuation of the business 2 years later was not close to what we sold it for. And not that it wasn't worth it, is that things changed. Here's the irony of that whole scenario. Let's just say it was a 25% valuation reduction, 25% in that 2 years. Here's what's even more interesting. During COVID, there was another significant reduction. And then in 2023, there was another significant reduction.
Wow.
17 to 2023, that's only 6 years. We sold in 17. 2023 was the last significant impact that I saw in that industry. And so in 3 times, they had what I would say across the board, a 10% reduction.
Wow.
So in distribution. So a 10% reduction, right? Compounded, no less, right?
Right, right.
This time, 10%, right? Compounded over a 6-year span of time. I would venture to say that what we sold the business for in 2017, in 2023, after that last adjustment, my bet is the business wasn't worth half of what it was.
No.
Right?
No.
If we had sold 6 years later in 2023, the business is worth
Zero.
maybe less than half. Maybe, well, no, I would never say zero, but certainly
But
probably
definitely significantly less. Yeah.
yeah. Which, when you look at it from that perspective, as an owner, sometimes you have to know when to pull the chips off the table. And that whole idea of a mental game, think about how much that messes with your psyche. Not only do I have to bust my ass and work really hard and put all this time and energy in to build the business up to get it to a certain valuation, now I have to know when to cash out. Because if I don't cash out at the right time, I cash out at the wrong time, I get a fraction of what it's worth, or maybe I don't get anything.
Right.
Right. So and again, that goes back to what we talked about two times ago, or two topics ago, which is having the right perspective. Right. If you're mentally, if you're tied up in the game, it is super hard to have that perspective. And knowing that it is a full-on mental, emotional roller coaster, you're a fool if you try and do that by yourself. I mean, that's why we have executive teams in bigger companies. That's why they have a CEO, a CFO, a COO, and a VP of sales, and a fractional, or I'm sorry, not fractional, but a CMO, a marketing officer, right? They all have their own in their areas of where they're competent and capable. And so when I go to make a decision about the business, and I go to you, and let's say you're my chief marketing officer, I say, Chris, what's the current trend on digital marketing? And you're like, well, this is what we see, and this many more people are going to be doing it. And the industry shows that they're expecting a 12% increase in digital marketing over the next 10 years. Well, as in a marketing agency, I'm saying double down on digital marketing or video marketing, because that's where the opportunity is.
Right.
Right. But I don't, as a CEO, I may or may not have that insight. And I'm relying on these other important, intelligent people in the organization to help me do that. When you're a small business owner, you don't have those resources.
You don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so having that coach to provide that objective perspective is super important.
Mm-hmm. So out of everything, we covered today, so obviously we covered a lot, but I guess if somebody was going to take away one nugget from this particular show, it's like, hey, business is hard. Don't do it alone, right? I mean, that's really
that's it. You got it on the
banner.
Yeah, the banner. Yeah, business is hard. Don't do it alone, because doing it alone is foolish. There's just no way you can do it alone and be successful long term. Anyway, you might have a short term win, right? Or even a series of wins, but long term, it's going to outgrow your competency, and you're going to need that added perspective that you might be lacking, right?
What's that one thing that Clay says? If you want to go somewhere, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, go with a team or something.
Go with others.
Go with others. Yeah. Something.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. It's a similar concept, right? Is that and when you think about it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. But so often as entrepreneurs, we want our ideas to be right. We want to. It's like there's another analogy there. You want to be right, or you want to be rich?
Right. Yeah, no doubt. There you go.
Right. You're idealistic. You want to be right, or you want to be rich? Personally, I'd prefer to be rich.
I'll take rich all day.
I can be rich all day long.
Yeah. You know what? But hey, you know what? Coach, you were right about that, point about starting the video marketing arm. You were so right about that, Hey,
right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Absolutely.
So, yeah. Great session. This is good. I like this.
Absolutely. And hey, just remember, go Knicks.
Oh, good Lord.
All right, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, Chris.
All right. Later, man.